Well, you tell me why we need a sermon. I do love worshiping at South Main. My goodness. I've been coming in and out of here for 50 years, and I've never gone away without my cup full. And this morning is certainly no exception to that. Each part of the service, the way they interface with each other and interact with each other in such a creative way. Thank you for including me in this wonderful experience. Does life ever seem to you like it's just kind of one great big hairball? Somebody said that bad things come in threes. Sometimes I think they come in 33s or 333s. There's a guy that worked for years in Kansas City, Missouri, named Gordon McKenzie. He was vice president for Imagination. How many corporations do you know that have a vice president for Imagination? He wrote a book about 15 years ago entitled Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And Al, who was in the early service this morning, came up and told me, he said, have you ever noticed there's some words you just enjoy saying? And he said, like Nebuchadnezzar. And I said, well, or Antiochus Epiphanes. He said, I'm a veterinarian and I've got one for you, Trichobezoar. Trichobezoar. You know what Trichobezoar is? Does anybody know what Trichobezoar is? It's a hairball. A vet would know that. He wrote this book entitled Orbiting the Giant Hairball, and his point is that whether you're talking about life in general or organizations in particular, life can be like a hairball where every day people bring more hair to the hairball and nobody ever takes any away. And it just gets more and more convoluted and more problematic. He says it leaves it basically with three alternatives. You get enmeshed in that hairball where you're just all tangled up in it and can't move. Or you get sick of the whole deal and just jettison from the deal, and you're out of the hairball, but you're also out of everything else. Or the third alternative is you learn to orbit the hairball. And you stay far enough away from it not to get enmeshed, but you're close enough to it to make a difference and to get some things done and to find some meaning. And when you learn to orbit the hairball like Jesus did, Jesus was always getting out of town, saying to those disciples, hey, we're going to the hills, we need some time. That's when you back off from the hairball, and then you move back in selectively and redemptively and begin to see this new thing that God is talking with us about through Isaiah. Look, watch, pay attention. I'm doing something really new that impacts your life and makes it totally different. To the point that hairballs don't get you down, you learn to deal with orbiting, going in and out. I'm going to do something here that I added up during the Sunday school hour. How many times I've taught preaching at a theological seminary? It's 11. I think I said 6 to 8 at 8:30. 11 times I've taught preaching, and every time I've said to the boys and girls that are there, don't read long stuff. It's boring. People don't have a high tolerance. You know, this is the TV age. Don't read long stuff. I'm going to read something that's kind of long. And if it doesn't come off, you can just blame me, because I warned them and I warned you. Gordon McKenzie, in this book, invites us to take a little trip. And that's what this is about. Listen. In your mind, conjure an image of the Mona Lisa. You got it? Visualize that masterpiece's subtleties of hue and tone as clearly as you can. You got it? Now, shift to the image of a paint-by-numbers Mona Lisa. Envision the flat, raw colors meeting, hard-edged, one against the other. Now let me relate a fantasy about masterpieces, paint-by-numbers, and you. It goes like this. Before you were born, God came to you and said, "Hi there. I just dropped by to wish you well and to assure you that we will be meeting again soon, before you know it. You're heading out on an adventure that will be filled with fascinating experiences. You'll start out as a tiny speck floating in an infinite dark ocean quite saturated with nutrients. So you won't have to go looking for food or a job or anything like that. All you'll have to do is float in the darkness and grow incredibly and change miraculously. You'll sprout arms and legs and hands and feet and fingers and toes as if from nothing your head will take form, your nose, your mouth, your eyes, and ears will emerge. As you continue to grow bigger and bigger, you will become aware that this dark oceanic environment of yours, which when you were tiny seemed so vast, is now actually cramped and confining. That will lead you to the unavoidable conclusion that you're going to have to move to a bigger place. After much groping in the dark, you will find an exit, the mouth of a tunnel. Too small, you'll decide, couldn't possibly squeeze through there, but there will be no other apparent way out. So with primal spunk, you will take on your first impossible challenge and enter the tunnel. In doing so, you will be embarking on a brutal, no turning back, physically exhausting, claustrophobic passage that will introduce you to pain, fear, and hard physical labor. It will seem to take forever. But mysterious undulations of this tunnel itself will help squirm you through. And finally, after what will seem like interminable striving, you will break through into a blinding light. Giant hands will pull you gently but firmly into an enormous room. There will be several huge people called adults huddled around you as if to greet you. And if it's an old-fashioned place, one of these humongous people may hold you upside down by the legs and give you a swat on the backside to get you going. All of this will be what the big people on the other side call being born. For you, it will be only the first of your new life's many exploits. God continues. I was wondering, while you're over there on the other side, would you do me a favor? Sure, you chirp. Would you take this artist's canvas with you and paint a masterpiece for me? I'd really appreciate that. Beaming, God hands you a pristine canvas. You roll it up, tuck it under your arm, and head off on your journey. Your birth is just as God had predicted, and when you come out of the tunnel into the bright room, some doctor or nurse looks down at you in amazement and gasps, "Look, that little kid is carrying a rolled up artist canvas." Knowing that you do not yet have the skills to do anything meaningful with your canvas, The big people take it away from you and give it to society for safekeeping until you have acquired the prescribed skills requisite to the canvas's return. While society is holding this property of yours, it cannot resist the temptation to unroll the canvas and draw pale blue lines and little blue numbers all over its virgin surface. Eventually, the canvas is returned to you, its rightful owner. However, it now carries the implied message that if you will paint inside the blue lines and follow the instructions of the little blue numbers, your life will be a masterpiece. And that is a lie. For more than 50 years, Mackenzie says, I worked on my paint-by-numbers creation. With uneven but persistent diligence, I dipped an emaciated paint-by-numbers brush into color number 1 and painstakingly painted inside each little blue border area marked 1. Then on to 2, 3, 4, and so on. Sometimes during restive periods of my life, I would paint, say, the 12 spaces before the 10, a token rebellion against overdoses of linearity. More than once, I painted beyond a line and, feeling embarrassed, would try to wipe off the errant color or cover it with another before anybody noticed my lack of perfection. From time to time, though not often, someone would compliment me, rather unconvincingly, on the progress of my masterpiece. I would gaze at the richness of others' canvases. Doubt about my own talent for painting gnawed at me. Still, I continued to fill in the little numbered spaces, unaware of or afraid to look at any real alternative. Then there came a time after half-century of daubing more or less inside the lines that my days were visited by traumatic events. The dividends of my noxious past came home to roost, and the myth of my life began horrifically to come unglued. I pulled back from my masterpiece in the works and saw it with amazing clarity. It looked awful. The stifled strokes of paint had nothing to do with me. They did not illustrate who I am or speak of who I could become. I felt duped, cheated, ashamed, anguished that I had wasted so much canvas, so much paint. I was angry that I had been conned into doing so. But that's past. Now, over. Today, I wield a wider brush, pure oxide bristle, and I'm swooping it through the sensuous goo of cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, or ultramarine blue, not numbers 4, 13, or 8, to create the biggest, brightest, funniest dragon that I possibly can. Because that has more to do with what's inside of me than some prescribed plagiarism of somebody else's tour de force. And then he concludes, you have a masterpiece inside you. You know? One unlike any that has ever been created or ever will be created. And remember, if you go to your grave without doing your masterpiece, it won't get done. Nobody can do your masterpiece but you. Only you. About the time I ran into that, y'all are going to think I'm going to read the phone book here in a little bit, but I'm not. This one's about that long. A guy named J. Stone wrote this little poem, I guess. The most visible creators I know of are those artists whose medium is life itself. The ones who express the inexpressible without brush, hammer, clay, or guitar. They neither paint nor sculpt. Their medium is being. Whatever their presence touches has increased life. They see and don't have to draw. They are the artists of being alive. The only B I made in first grade was in art. I was awfully glad to run into Jay Stone's assurance that I don't have to be a painter in order to do my masterpiece. And I've found it to be an awful lot of fun since I ran into this to see my life from that perspective. I think that's precisely what Isaiah is saying in the language that you've already heard this morning. I think it is precisely what Paul is saying to the church in Rome that you've already heard this morning. At the risk of reading one more thing, I want to read that Isaiah passage from Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the New Testament. Peterson says, forget about what's happened or what's happening right now, and I would add that looks like a hairball. Don't keep going over old history. Be present. Be alert. I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I'm making a road through the desert, rivers in the Badlands. The new thing, the masterpiece. Let's look at Romans. Eugene Peterson gives a title to this section, and the title is, The Solution is Life on God's Terms. And this is what he says. With the arrival of Jesus the Messiah, that fateful dilemma that you're living with is resolved. Those who enter into Christ being here for us no longer have to live under a continuous, low-lying black cloud of hairballs. That's my addition. A new power is now in operation. The Spirit of life in Christ, like a strong wind, has magnificently cleared the air, freeing you from a fated lifetime of brutal tyranny. Peterson says you've got three choices. You can get so wrapped up in the hairball that you can't get loose. You can junk it and leave it and forget it. Or you can learn to see your opportunity as a masterpiece. With whatever your giftedness is, with whatever your interests are, with whatever you find as challenging, whatever you find that sounds like a calling where God is saying, would you take this and do me a masterpiece while you're over there? And remember, if you don't do it, it won't get done, because there's only one person that has your assignment, and that's you. For us to see God as the giver of the assignment of masterpiece, for us to see God as the encourager and the equipper who gives us, when we're in the womb, a DNA of giftedness that opens up a whole new wide world that enables you, number one, to become who you are, and number two, to become who you can be. I don't know what kind of shape that takes. I can tell you, mine with these fingers is not going to be a guitar. It's not going to be artistry on a canvas or a sculpting assignment. I take great comfort in the idea that there is a unique way for me to discover what my masterpiece is calling me to do. And I need to step back and get the perspective of what my life can be if I recognize that I'm on an assignment from God the Creator. Does that make any sense to you? Do you ever apply that kind of insight and encouragement to the hairballs you deal with in your life? Is there that concept, that commitment in your life that wants to stay that close in touch with God, who helps you know when to go in and when to go back into orbit? I had a friend 25 years ago who told me that he made $10,000 a day as a consultant. This was 25 years ago. I said, my goodness, what do you do that's worth $10,000 a day? My goodness, my salary wasn't much more than that. Well, he said, it's no big deal. I just go in and do my best to help them keep the main thing the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing. Raises the question, what's the main thing for you? And how do you keep the main thing the main thing? I think that's how Jesus knew when to go in and when to come out. When Jesus knew that it was time for him not to fight the coalition of the state and the religion of the day who wanted to kill him, but give his life a ransom for many. That was his masterpiece. And God's masterpiece was the resurrection morning when a new thing happened. So it raises the question for us as a group of Christians, a group of Baptists, a group of South Main people that love South Main and are grateful for South Main. We have all sorts of groups that can become so hairball infested that they strangle us. But if we keep the main thing, which is the worship of God and the service of God, it opens up our being able to return to our Creator and say, here's what I did. And I hope you're going to hear those words, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I'm going to make you leader over a bunch. How are you coming with your masterpiece? We're going to sing a hymn, well-chosen hymn. Could be that somebody here is looking for a church home. If I were to move to Houston, I would join South Main Baptist Church before Sunday if they would let me. My goodness, what a place of music and missions and proclamation and service this church has been for years and years and years and years. If you're looking for a church home, I recommend this one. Could be that you're here today and you have never made a public profession of your faith in Jesus the Christ. You've never said, I want to sign on for doing my masterpiece with his help and his encouragement. Aaron is going to come to stand here to receive anyone who would like to make an open commitment, or if there's a private commitment just between you and God, that's where it really starts. Make your commitment as we stand to sing this hymn.